Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So after the sketchbook tour video, I've decided finally on which sketchbook I was going to end up using. So instead of my usual blank notebooks that I've been using, I think for the last 3 sketchbook tours, I am using this beautiful, gorgeous sketchbook from Purilly. Name will be on the screen because I do not know how to pronounce their name. But I think using this particular sketchbook is going to be a good change of pace and hopefully make me a little bit more excited in sketching in it. So it has the typical kind of layout. It has a band on the back that you can use to close your sketchbook. It also has a ribbon as a little bookmark and has a pocket in the back. So I did the thumbnailing off screen on a sticky note. Sometimes I do this on the back side of the front first page, but this time I decided not to just because I was planning on using alcohol markers potentially for this spread. So if you're not familiar, technically, I usually like to do a hello page and a goodbye page for all of my sketchbooks, and I usually make them into a video. So today is going to be the first page of the sketchbook, including the what I would consider our hello or welcome page into the sketchbook. So to start off, I was sketching with I think a light blue mechanical pencil lead, but because it doesn't really show up on camera, I decided to switch over to just normal graphite so that you guys can see a little bit more easily. And then we are going to do some inking afterwards. And I think the graphite actually works quite well because it's easily erased on this type of paper, which is something I wanted to talk about as well. So as I'm going to be sketching out my OC Kaisen for the front page, so just for a little bit of like a reminder, I guess, I tend to draw Wonu or my OC Masaki for the front page of all of my sketchbooks, but this time I am going to be drawing Kaisen for a little bit of a change of pace, and I just think the idea that I had kind of fits his color palette and stuff a little bit more easily. So at the beginning of the video, I did talk about the fact that this particular book would be a good change of pace for myself, and it's for kind of like 2 main reasons. One is that the size of it is much smaller and is a square type. So previous times that I've used any kind of sketchbook, I tend to lean towards the A5 size as it's the most easy for me to carry around, but I think as a full spread, it becomes like a lot larger because I'm doubling the space, which comes out to more of a squarish rectangle, if that makes sense. But using a square sketchbook, when I lay it out, I get more of a horizontal layout, which I'm hopefully going to take advantage of that for future little spreads and stuff. I have some ideas that I want to do, so hopefully I'll make those into videos later on. But the second kind of reason that I think this would be a good change of pace for me is the paper type. So as I mentioned, the last 3 kind of sketchbooks, quote unquote, they are my blank notebooks, and they do have like very thin paper, which for me is not exactly a deal breaker. So before I kind of continue with that thought, I am going to be adding text on the left side of the page. So I'm using 1001fonts.com to kind of help me pick a style of font or just give a good outline or guideline to how I want the text to look. So I'm following a text pretty closely, except for that I'm going to be connecting all of my letters together, similar to handwriting or like cursive, instead of having each individual letter separate like the font originally had, and I'm adding a clover at the very end. So back to my previous thought, the paper type, like I said, for my notebooks is on the thinner side, so different types of art mediums are going to react very differently. It's still very smooth, but the paper type I find is not super absorbent to certain inks. Let's say like a lot of my inking pens that are needlepoint don't dry super nicely as they remain wet for a longer period of time, and it probably is due to the fact that the paper is not as porous because it's so thin. But ghosting is another problem that I feel like the thinner paper has as well, so I tend to not pick certain types of inks or fine liners either. But my favorite method of like filling a sketchbook spread obviously is usually using the water-based markers alongside with some kind of inking pen or fine liner. So I found myself liking the thicker paper in this particular sketchbook because it's kind of like a thicker, very smooth, almost Bristol paper or some kind of like thicker, smooth art paper. So it holds a lot of mediums, I think, very well. I've used a bunch of other artist sketchbooks in the past. And when I say artist sketchbook, I kind of mean like the custom ones. So I've used one by, I think, Tricky Wagon. I have 2 of theirs. And then I have 2 of, I think they're, I'm trying to remember what are they go by. So it's either Hello Today Coffee or Eeks, I think they go by as well. I'll make sure to link their stuff either in the description or have their names on the screen. And then I had one from an artist called Lana J. So all of those ones have very similar kind of thick, smooth, kind of art paper, which I think is more suitable for a mixed medium. But because it's smooth, some people might find it a little bit difficult for, let's say, graphite or colored pencils if you do prefer kind of more of a grittier, rougher texture for the surface. But for me, this paper I know works super well with pencil, or at least like how I like to work on it, alongside with gouache and water-based mediums. So even though the paper is not meant for water-based mediums, I still find the thickness does not warp the page too much, but also a lot of my water-based markers and ink just dry a little bit nicer compared to the notebook paper. So once I'm done with this particular sketchbook, I probably will be using one of my old notebooks once again. And I think with the timing of this video, my store should be reopened. So if it is, I'll make sure to leave like some kind of pinned comment or something, or a community post to let you guys know. But yeah, I probably will be reverting back to one of my blank notebooks, or if I can do some good planning and the timing whenever this particular sketchbook is finished, I'm going to do a little bit of digging around and seeing if I can find a manufacturer to help with making an actual proper sketchbook instead of doing the blank notebooks all the time, just because I would like to change the paper type at like my preference rather than using a blank notebook all the time. Like I said, I still enjoy using the thinner paper, but I think I'm still bogged down with the fact that I was getting frustrated with certain mediums on the paper. But I've had like a lot of my favorite spreads come from those blank notebook paper notebooks, so I know it's more of like a me thing rather than the actual product, but it would be still kind of fun to play around with different paper types in the future. So look out for maybe an actual sketchbook in the later half of 2025 if I can do my research properly. But let's talk about the art right now. So at some point in the video, I did show that I switched to using a fine liner, and these are the Ohuhu Fineliners, and I picked 3 different ones. So I believe I'm using 0.1, 0.5, and 1.0. So I mostly did the thinner inking, which I'm doing right now with all the 0.1. It just gets a lot of like smaller, delicate details. And even though I'm not like super confident in doing inking, I think this method worked the best for what I was trying to go for. So my initial idea, if you remember seeing the thumbnail, I'm not too sure how clear it was, but I wanted a very kind of like monochromatic look for Kaisen, and then I would have the flowers with a little bit more of a pop of color and flowers that kind of creep into our front pages with a little bit of color and a simple hello on the front to keep everything kind of like minimalistic compared to how I've done it in the past. So I am going to be doing some of the color, majority of the color I will be doing with alcohol markers, and they are the Ohuhu brand as well. So I know that these fine liners most likely will work very well with these particular fine liners. So I don't really have to worry too much with the kind of like bleeding of the alcohol markers and the fine liner together. But I did not really do a test run with the amount of bleed through I'm going to have for the alcohol markers, just for the backside of like the ghosting of our paper. So for the most part, I was still confident that it wasn't going to be a total mess. So the one in my notebooks, you almost get like a 1-to-1 ghosting on the backside of your paper because the paper is super thin. But because this one is fairly thick, I knew that it would not be as intense, but I was not sure of how much would still bleed through and whether or not the backside was going to be super usable. which for the most part is not a problem. If you guys want me to do a video on how to cover up the backside of your bleed throughs on like sketchbook paper, do let me know, because I know there are quite a few different ways you can do so, and there might be another product I kind of want to see if I can get to see if that's a little bit easier of a way to cover up bleed through. And some people don't really care about the bleed through. I know some people who draw on the right side remain drawing on the right side, so if you have bleed through on the left side of the back side of your page, it doesn't really matter. But for me, I do like using as much of the real estate in the sketchbook as I can, which means I'm using every side of the paper. So I like to use usually sticky notes to cover that side, but the bleed through actually becomes very minimal because of my color selection alongside of where I'm placing the colors. For the most part on this entire spread is not going to be super intense. So in terms of the layout, I do like the fact that because this is a square sketchbook, once you do a full spread, it is more of a horizontal or like a landscape format. So it makes a little bit of an easier time to make some, I guess, like adjustments to different compositions to make them a little bit more eye-catching, maybe. So for this one in particular, I definitely wanted more of a minimalistic left side of our welcome page. So I wanted a little bit of color and just like a little bit of a peek through. Peeping? So basically, I want the branches just kind of slightly come in towards our page so that it's not going to be obstructing anything. But I kind of wanted to link the two sides together as much as I could, as Kaisen is primarily only on the right side. So having that upper branch that kind of bridges our seam or our little, I guess it's the seam in the center of our little sketchbook spread right here. It kind of helps bridge everything together. So for the colors, I ended up only choosing, I think, 4 colors. I choose a neutral gray. I chose a very pastel light green, a light purple, and then more of a mid-tone darker purple to kind of bring out a little bit more of an intense color. So I should have probably talked about this. I'm not sure if it was mentioned in the sticky note at the very beginning. So the reason why I'm doing alcohol markers on Kaisen entirely first, and then I will add the color to only the bouquet, was my excitement for doing this particular layout was actually because I was gonna do screen tones for the front of my sketchbook instead. So I was gonna have Kaisen be shaded in entirely with screen tones, but I noticed that I don't have any that is going to be dark enough, and the amount of screen tone that I probably would have used on the entirety of our front page, which would have been super minimal. So I thought it would be an easier time for me to just do it with an alcohol marker instead. So I just used more of a neutral gray, and then I went ahead and did a light purple kind of wash of color on top of our flowers, and noticed that it looked a little bit too muted. So that's why I brought in our darker purple and I blended it out a little bit. I might have to go back into some of my previous sketchbooks to check whether or not this paper actually reacts super well with alcohol markers. I definitely think the transition between the light purple and the dark purple are a little bit too large. So I feel like it would have been a little bit easier to get a smoother application if I chose another purple to kind of bridge the light and the dark so that it looks a little bit more seamless. But for the most part, I didn't really care too much because I think it still looks kind of pretty. I decided to use the light green also for the text. So for the most part, I definitely do a hello as kind of our main welcoming phrase, I guess, and then I usually put goodbye at the very end. I think the exception was the one that I did of Wonu, where I put game start, I think, and then the other one was thank you for playing, as recommended by you guys, as a more positive ending note instead of saying game over. And I like the layout of that, but the simplicity of this I think just looks really cute, and I don't know, it just feels a little bit less pressure to make something super full and poppy and very like in your face as a welcome page. So I definitely wanted to keep everything minimal, keep the colors to a very minimal color palette. Oh, wait, I guess I chose another color in the end. So I guess this is 5 colors in total. So I chose a very light kind of muted pink to do a drop shadow. I've done this in a previous video as well, but I do like this look and it kind of just adds a little bit more color to our text, which is very monochromatic. But I think it turned out really cute. I do end up blurring the edges like I'm doing right now with a colorless blender just to make it a little bit more seamless as a blend towards the white of the paper. But for the most part, I think this is it for our final spread. So like I said, it would have been nice to use screen tones, but none of my screen tones are dark enough for Kaisen's outfit or his hair in a way that I feel like would have matched nicely in contrast with our pop of color, so I decided to do that all with fine liners. I might go back and fill in some of the spots so that it's more of a flat color. So I think that is it for our little welcome intro page to this particular sketchbook. I know some people find it very intimidating doing the first page in a sketchbook, so I highly recommend either jumping around or even just turning to the second page, and you can always fill in the first page like maybe as the last page of your sketchbook. There's no need to like do all the pages in chronological order. But this kind of marks our first day of using the sketchbook. So as tradition for myself, I like to put the start and end date in the front inside cover. So start date for me is August 19th, 2024. And we'll see when the sketchbook ends for me. Hopefully not as long as the previous one, considering that this one probably has less pages and is considerably smaller. But hopefully you guys enjoyed watching me do the front page and will enjoy seeing what else comes out from this particular sketchbook. I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!